You are listening to the Rack Radio Podcast. Get ready.
We are back with episode 5 of Rack Radio today. Today we're going to talk about speed and agility. And when I talk about speed and agility, I'm talking about from a team sport perspective. All right. So I'm not talking about high level Olympic sprinters or stuff like that. So there is some correlation over from training track athletes to training team sport athletes like football, baseball, basketball, but it's a little different, in terms of how we train them from speed perspective. So I'm going to watch a couple of videos today and kind of not really critique them, but just this is stuff that's put out there on social media, and there's some good things from a speed and agility standpoint that's out there. There's some things that might necessarily really good things, okay? And then there are things that they look really good and they work, but not necessarily for certain populations. A lot of times with speed and agility training, if you've been in this industry for a while, you know that true speed comes down to force production into the ground, okay, and ground contact time. So, so how do you get more force production from when you're working acceleration, maybe the first 10 to 15 yards? Most of the time, you got to get a little stronger. So you can put more force into the ground, and the ground's going to react, and you're going to develop more speed that way. Sometimes it's about mobility. If you're not able to get full hip extension when you're sprinting, that's a problem. That could be somewhere, where you're having lack of production, getting able to fully extend your hip when you push off the ground. So that might be things that we have to work on. So speed and agility is not as complex as people like to make it. For us here, it's pretty simple how we develop speed and how we get athletes faster. But again, we're just going to review some of these videos. So the first one up here, it's a speed training workout from this guy. He's starting out doing some single leg hurdles, which is great, in my opinion, to really just get the whole ankle-knee complex kind of firing. So he's doing single-leg pogos over low hurdles. I think that's great to kind of get some plantar flexion and dorsiflexion in the ankle and get kind of the whole lower limb complex warmed up before you do any kind of speed work. So he's going into that first. Then he's going into one of our favorite drills here for speed production, which is the push-up start or the ground start. The reason why we love this drill so much and why it does have really good carryover is because of the acceleration angle that it puts you in. So when you're working acceleration, the phase is from anywhere between 5 and 15 yards. We typically will test a 10-yard in our facility here because we have enough room to run 10 yards and then fully decelerate. So we're not just stomping through the 10 yards. We're able to decelerate and work on deceleration, which is another big component of speed training that I think a lot of people miss out on, and we'll talk about that later. But the angle that the push-up sprint starts you in is a pretty good 45-degree angle, all right, which is what you need when you're working acceleration. It also teaches you, especially young athletes, so I'm talking younger high school kids or middle school kids, to really punch the knee forward on the first step. If you come up out of a push-up and you don't punch the knee forward, you're going to fall straight over on your face. So again, it teaches really good first step knee drive, which is really, really big for speed production. He's running 15 yards here. That's great. Again, we like a 10-yard. But if you tell someone, hey, we're going to run 15 yards, they're going to run hard for the full 15 yards. So it's actually, I like telling people a little bit further than we're actually going to run so they don't just stop once they get through the 10 yards. So from there, he's going into a supine turnover sprint. Again, love these. So being flat on your back, kind of taking a cue from a coach or just an internal cue from yourself to react, flip over, roll around. Again, it's just another push-up sprint variation once we get rolled around over into his stomach, okay? But again, it's reactionary, which is great, and it still teaches that first knee drive in the first step. So love this drill as well. We'll do this sometimes where I'll put it on a cadence. So we'll have athletes on their back, and I'll say, you're going to go on my clap, okay? And then I won't clap, and I'll say go and see if they react. So again, it's about reacting to a stimulus, okay? The next drill that he does is a kind of a dead stop turn and go. Again, I really like these a lot because it's reaction. That's what change of direction is. So true change of direction, true agility training is reacting to a stimulus, all right? And some of these videos I already know are going to have cone drills and have ladder drills and stuff like that. All that stuff is great, but when you really think about true agility training and change of direction, it's reacting to a stimulus, all right? So that's the end of this first video. Oh no, I'm sorry. He actually goes into the last thing, are 3 repetitive broad jumps. Again, great. Broad jumps are more horizontal force production, less vertical force production. That's what sprinting is horizontal force production. So again, we talked about force production in the intro. Horizontal broad jumps like this will lend to better horizontal force production in the athlete when they're sprinting. So overall, this first video, very good, very, very good, very practical even for younger kids too. Some of this stuff that we're going to talk about today is kind of flashy and is good if you've already kind of built that foundational block in your athletes, of that they can do some of this higher level stuff. But far too many times I see a lot of young kids who don't have any force production at all, especially 9th and 10th graders, doing a lot of higher level sprint and plyo metrics that they're not really ready to do, honestly, in my opinion. So the second video here that we got is more, he's doing foot drills, ladder drills here. Again, ladder drills in our industry kind of get a bad rap. I'll be the first to admit that, because I think ladders wouldn't get as bad of a rap if they just didn't call it a speed ladder, honestly, because ladder drills aren't really doing anything for you from a speed perspective. Let's be honest. I think they're great for warming up, again, and kind of grooving patterns and getting your ankle to dorsiflex, to plantar flex, and just kind of overall warming your ankle complex up. But again, ladder drills are a learned pattern, okay? So when you're looking at doing some of these things, like karaoke's through a ladder, an icky shuffle, one leg in, one leg out, you just got to understand what you're doing with this stuff and what it's actually doing. It's great for warming up. It's halfway decent for coordination, but as far as change of direction or agility goes, it's not really doing anything for you. Again, you're going to get really good at this learned pattern, but it's not necessarily going to correlate over and transfer over to your sport, okay? So change of direction, agility, again, when we're saying true change of direction or true agility, we're talking about reacting to a stimulus, all right? So reacting to the ball going a certain way, reacting to your opponent going a certain way, watching the way, if you're, just say football, for instance, change of direction, you're following the ball, as a linebacker, and the running back makes a stiff cut, you've got to be able to react to that stimulus and then follow him, okay? So that is true agility and change of direction training. But again, ladders are great for warming up. We use ladders here, but use them for what they're intended to really be used for, okay? Is it increasing your foot speed? Yeah, but it's increasing your foot speed in a learned pattern, all right? Sport is not a learned pattern. It's chaotic, all right? Things are going to happen. You're going to have to react differently. So just remember that when you're doing your speed ladder or your ladder drills. All right, so the third video is basically it's going to be a complex here or a contrast set, whatever you want to call it, complex training, contrast training. Essentially what that is you're taking a resisted movement for the first movement and then an unresisted movement for the second movement. They have to kind of match, okay? So power production is plane specific, okay? So, and what I mean is if you're trying to increase your vertical power, then you need to work in a vertical movement. So things like squats, deadlifts, things like a bench press is in the horizontal plane as well, but it's for upper body. So just because it's horizontal doesn't mean that that's going to carry over, to a vertical power. So this video has a resisted, it says if you're struggling with your acceleration in the first 3 steps, try this. It's a heavy resisted band, kind of 5-yard sprint. And then he's going into an unresisted sprint after he does the heavy band resisted. This is great, in my opinion, and we do this a lot here as well, because you're basically tricking your central nervous system into thinking that you're constantly going to have the heavier load on you. So when you have a resisted band, or we use bands here for resisted sprints, we use sleds here for resisted sprints. We have the 1080 sprint here as well, and then we also have our shred mill here as well that we can do resisted sprints off of. This stuff is great, especially even for young athletes. The resisted is going to teach you to punch and to push back into the ground to try to exert as much force into the ground as possible. And then you go into an unresisted kind of body weight sprint. So you should run faster off of this, okay? Because again, like I said, you're tricking your central nervous system into thinking that that load is always going to be there, which it's not. So the protocol for this would be we might do a 5 to 10 yard resisted sprint with the 1080 sprint or a heavy band. You don't want to go too heavy with the resistance because you don't want it throwing off the mechanics of the athlete, and you want them to be able to punch into the ground and produce force. If it's too heavy, sometimes they're going to kind of be all over the place and just trying to move the resistance, which is not what you want, all right? Then taking about a 20-second rest. You don't have to go right into the unresisted right after the resisted. Take about a 20-second rest and then go and do your unresisted sprint, okay? And if you're doing it correctly and you're taking your rest time appropriately, you should be getting faster as this speed session would go, all right? If you get faster on the first couple, say you had 5 or 6 sets that you were going to run, the first 3 you improve upon your regular sprint after the resisted sprint. Might not improve on the 4th, you don't improve on the 5th, you would cut the set there, all right? Just because you have a certain amount of sets that you have planned doesn't mean that that's how many sets you're actually going to do, all right? Again, this is something that works, but it might not work all the time. So if the sprint times aren't getting better when you're doing this contrast or complex training, you let the speed dictate how many sets you do, all right? But overall, a good video there as well. The next one is titled How to Get Twitchy, okay? So a lot of kind of just fast twitch, kind of, again, ankle complexes, plyometrics, stuff like that. Again, all good drills, great drills for warming up for a speed and plyo session, kind of priming the system and everything like that. The one thing that I'm going to kind of critique here is I hate this phrase, slow feet don't eat. That was like so popular like 15 years ago. It's making a comeback. I don't know why. What does that even mean? Slow feet don't eat. Like, I mean, it's just stupid in my opinion, because when you're training speed, and when we train speed here, one of the ways that we develop speed is using a heavy sled to push. We slow the movement down to get full hip extension, okay, which is what you're going to have to do when you sprint. So obviously when you do that with a heavy sled, you might sprint with it, but 9 times out of 10, we're going to be moving slow with it, okay? I can't tell someone, if we're trying to work on force production and mechanics, just go run slower. It doesn't work that way, okay? Especially when you're accelerating. Now, when you start coming up into top speed, into max velocity, where you're more vertical and it's more of a cycling move between your hips and your legs and not a punching forward move, you can run a little bit slower that way. But I can't tell someone to go just accelerate slow, all right? They're not going to maintain proper lean. They're not going to be able to punch out in front, and they're probably just going to fall over, or they're going to stand straight up out of the block. And we don't want that when we're training acceleration. So just stop saying slow feet don't eat, is a long story short, because it just irritates me, because it's stupid. And I say that because we have done a lot of heavy sprint or heavy sled pulls, heavy sled pushes, and the result are athletes get faster, all right? So again, don't just fall for the trap of these big headlines and taglines and stuff like that. So other than that, this is actually a pretty good video, again, for warming up the ankle complex, the hip complex, and getting ready to do either a plyometric training session or a speed session. I like how they have different variations of the sprint here, an unloaded and then a resisted. Again, great. All right. So the last video that we have here is, again, it's going to work. It's complex training. Complex or contrast training is very, very popular. Especially here recently, over the last couple of years, I see a lot more complex or contrast training on social media. And it's because it works, but it's not new. It's not just like the person that's posting it invented it or anything like that. It's been around forever. Essentially, again, you're taking a heavier resisted movement and then going into a similar movement pattern that is unresisted. And you're trying to promote, you're trying to prime the central nervous system into producing more force or power. So, for instance, in this video that we're watching, this is an NFL player doing a high-weighted step-up with a knee drive. So that is simulating more of the top speed or max velocity mechanics in the sprint, where the foot is striking up under you instead of out in front of you, which is where it strikes in acceleration. So he's doing these high-weighted step-ups for a couple of reps and then going into a rear foot elevated kind of cycling speed jump, okay, for the single leg. Again, just simulating those top speed mechanics, driving up with hip flexion and then the foot striking right up under you and you're cycling right back through. Those are top speed mechanics, okay? So at the end of the day, these videos are good, but when we talk about sprinting and building true speed, you have two phases, okay? You have the acceleration phase, and then you have the transition into top speed or max velocity. Like I said earlier, acceleration is about horizontal force production. The foot is going to strike out in front of you. Then you're going to push back through the ground, and then the next foot is going to strike in front of you. When you start coming up and transitioning into the top speed, you're going to be more vertical, all right? The foot is now going to strike up under your center of mass. So your hip's going to go into flexion. Then it's going to strike right up under you, cycle back through, all right? So we have acceleration, short ground contact time, but force production. Top speed, again, short ground contact time, but more of a cycling motion there, all right? So I talked about two of the drills that we really like here. One of them is a resisted sprint. Another was the push-up start sprint, or kind of prone start sprint. The rollover into sprint, again, is a great drill. We use that with a lot of our younger athletes just to kind of, again, we're trying to build them basically listening to a cue. So we'll say things like, we'll have them close their eyes and we'll say, you go on my clap. And then to make sure that they're paying attention, I might say go or now, see if they react to it. If they react to it, they're not paying attention. So we'll go back and we'll say, hey, it's on a clap. It's not on me talking, okay? Another drill that we really, really like here for building acceleration in speed is, and I know not everyone has this available to them, but our shred mill. Our shred mill, we're able to change the resistance kind of manually and in the system to what you're actually going to be sprinting against on the tread. We can go completely flat with the tread, or we can take it all the way up to an incline of 20%, which will kind of lead me into our next, really one of my favorite drills for acceleration, but we'll talk about that in a second. What we're able to do with the shred mill is, while we're manipulating the resistance on it, we're getting miles per hour on our athlete on it, okay? The tread itself actually allows us to see as well what foot they're striking the ground more with and what foot they're able to put more force production into the ground with, because the tread will slide to either side. So if it slides to the left, the athlete is obviously putting more force production in the ground with their left foot. Okay, so that means we know as the coaches that we need to work on their right side mechanics a little bit more, kind of do a little bit more unilateral work to get that right leg to put more force into the ground and catch up with the left, all right? And things like our force plate tests and everything like that are showing that as well, all right? But the shred mill, it kind of, I don't think they intended it to do that, but it kind of has that built-in kind of cue just for us to say, okay, we know that you're putting more force into the ground with one foot or the other there. We can also work top speed on the shred mill, again, resisted, all right? That's something that we kind of reserve for some of our higher level athletes, some of our older high school kids, college and pro, all right? Younger kids, we need to build the foundation of accelerating properly before we start thinking about top speed mechanics as well as resisted top speed mechanics. So another one of our favorite drills, the falling starts. So we can do these resisted. If we wanted to, we can do these unresisted. And essentially, you don't need any special equipment to do this. Again, we're going to test it in a 10-yard. So it's essentially the athlete's going to come up on their toes. They're going to lean as far as they can until they feel like they're going to drop, and then they're going to punch the foot out in front. Okay? So again, just a really good drill to teach first step knee drive in the acceleration. And you don't have to have any equipment to do this, all right? We like the 10 yards when we're testing speed. We like multiple sets, but again, we're after quality, we're not after quantity. So if the quality starts dropping on these drills and on these sets, we cut the set, okay? You can go anywhere between 5 and 8 sets. Good rule of thumb here for rest times, because a lot of stuff that I see on social media, especially Instagram, talking about this is a speed training video, there's improper rest times. All right, rest times are really, really big, and that's what's going to depend on if this is a true speed and agility session, or speed and change of direction session, or conditioning. Don't turn your speed training into conditioning, okay? Speed training is about as much quality as you can get and then taking full rest time. So a good kind of just rule of thumb for every 10 yards, 60 seconds rest. All right, so if we're sprinting 10 yards, we're going to rest at least 60 seconds in between sets. Sometimes they might need more. We'll give them more. All right, that's where you really have to talk to your athlete and understand what your athlete is saying with their feedback. All right, it's not just, well, this is what I had written and I'm the coach, so you're going to do what I say. They have to have proper recovery for it to be true speed training. If they're not recovering properly, you're just doing conditioning work and you're calling it speed training. Okay, so that's another drill that we really like. Another acceleration drill that I like as well is the jump back start. You would start in front of the line, jump back into a split stance. When you jump back into that split stance, you're already in a 45-degree lean, all right? And then you're going to punch the front foot out with a good knee drive, hit the ground, and then produce force going back into the ground, all right? So if you kind of notice, a lot of our acceleration drills are all about that first knee drive, all right? It's very, very important. With younger athletes and younger kids, when you see them run, they take a bunch of steps, and it's kind of like choppy steps. They don't really go anywhere, but they take a bunch of steps. When you're younger, the person that takes the most amount of steps is going to be the fastest. As we get older and we continue to train and we get up into high school athletics and college athletics and the pros, the person that takes the fewest amount of steps is going to be the fastest, okay? So with young kids, we just really focus on acceleration mechanics and trying to teach them how to punch forward and take fewer steps, all right, in a 10-yard sprint, all right? A solid 10-yard sprint, 5 to 6 steps, all right? And that's going to be difficult to do from a young age, but as we get older and we continue to train, 5 to 6 steps are really, really good acceleration, and we might film it and count the number of steps that they take as well. So for acceleration, those are probably my 5 to 6 favorite acceleration drills, and we might mix those in and out. We might combine them. We might stick with one for a certain amount of time and then switch to another. Again, there's a million acceleration drills that you can do and a million different acceleration workouts that you can do for speed production. These are just some of my favorites and some of our favorites here at the gym. Now, talking about change of direction. So change of direction and agility training is probably what I see messed up the most on social media, because it's a lot of, like I said earlier, ladder drills and cone drills. All that stuff is great. It really is. And we do that stuff here. But when we're talking about true agility training and change of direction training, like I said earlier, you have got to be able to react to a stimulus, because that's what you're going to be doing in your sport or in your event, okay? So even with our pros and our higher level college kids, we do tag games here. That's stuff I don't see done enough on social media. Tag games are great. They seem very rudimentary or very easy or simple. It's because they are, but they have big, big carryover into change of direction and agility, and it breeds competition too. So we will take pros, and when we're doing speed and agility with them, we'll line them up. We might have them seated where one is facing this way, the other is seated behind them, facing them. They've got to react to the person starting the sprint first and then try to chase them down. Does that make sense? So they'll the first person will flip around and take off. The person in front of them has to react and go to chase them, but the person that is leading the drill and running can go any direction they want within the allotted yards that we set. The person chasing them has to react to them changing direction and go after them. So that's what I'm talking about when I say true change of direction training and agility training is reactionary. So tag drills are great. Even something like grabbing the flag or something is great for change of direction and agility. Putting cones in a circle or putting a massive hula hoop on the ground and having someone just chase the other around in a circle like that, you're reacting to a stimulus. It's great. Like it's going to do more for your change of direction and agility than just lining up and doing drills, okay? Another one of our favorite here is the mirror drill. It's a lateral change of direction drill. If I was leading the drill, my partner would be standing in front of me. I'm shifting laterally. We typically do it between 5 and 10 yards. My partner has to keep up with me as I change directions. He doesn't know or she doesn't know where I'm going to change. All they have to do is watch when I change and try to stay with me. So another good way that we can make sure that they're kind of staying with each other is we'll put a pop belt around them, okay, that's going to rip off and tear if I get too far, to the right or too far to the left, and they're not keeping up with me. That belt's going to tear, and I'm going to win that set. So again, we're trying to create competition and training intensity even when we're doing our speed work, and doing things like that, implementing games, as silly as it might sound or as easy as it might sound, it really has a high carryover to the sporting event, basketball, baseball, football, whatever. Now, kind of the last thing that I'm going to talk about is with young kids, you don't really need to get so in the weeds of this athlete plays baseball, this athlete plays basketball, this athlete plays football, okay? At a young age, you just need to develop the athlete, all right? You need to do things that are very general. You're not trying to replicate sport in here. You're not trying to mimic the act on the field in the weight room. You're just trying to build general adaptation in GPP. Then we start to develop more and get into more SPP or specific physical preparedness. So once you're in high school and you might be an upperclassman or junior or senior, especially in college, and in the pros, we can start getting a little bit more specific depending on your position, how many yards you need to accrue in a speed training session, okay? If you're a lineman, say you're a college lineman or an NFL lineman, you live between 5 and 10 yards, all right? If you're running 20 yards down the field or something unless you're on a pulling block and you just are that good and you're that guy that you're not going to let go of your block and you're going to work them until the end of the play. But 9 times out of 10, if you're a lineman and, especially an offensive lineman might run a little bit further, but say a defensive lineman, if a defensive lineman is running 20 yards down the field, something has gone wrong, okay? So we might train our bigs, in the 5 to 15 yard range predominantly. I'm not saying we won't ever go out of that, but we will probably stick between the 5 and 15 yard. But someone will just stay with football here and say a receiver or a cornerback or a DB, they got to cover a little bit more ground. So we will go, a lot more yardage with those guys, and we might do a lot more volume with those guys, okay, depending on how they can handle it, because the longer yards and the more volume or the more sets that you do have to put in, they got to recover from it. So again, all of this is dependent for the most part on what the athlete needs the most and what they can recover from. So, again, volume for bigger athletes might be a little bit less. Volume for lighter athletes that are going to run a lot more, obviously it's going to be higher. When you think in terms of, I think baseball and basketball are two sports that really is a little bit different. Basketball is a lot of start, stop, change of direction, going in an opposite direction at the drop of a hat. So you kind of have to work. I'm not saying you don't work linear speed with basketball, but it's a lot more change of direction, kind of absorbing and then redirecting the force, all right? Again, talking about deceleration, which we will get into here in just a second. Football is more of, an average play can last 4 to 6 seconds, and then you get a 30 to 45 second rest, depending on the play clock. If you call a timeout, you might get longer rest, all right? Baseball is one of those sports where if you play in the outfield, you might not ever move. The ball might not even get hit to you, So you might just be standing around waiting for something to come your way. That doesn't mean that you don't need to train speed and change of direction. It just means that in my opinion, you don't need to place that much of an emphasis on it as you would, in another sport. Take a catcher or take a pitcher. They need to work speed training and change of direction, but maybe not as much as a middle infielder or a position player, if that makes sense, okay? Now, probably the biggest thing that I see, especially on social media and especially when I talk to other coaches and see what they're doing, is no one places any importance on deceleration, all right? If you're all gas and no brakes, I know that's what everybody wants to be, is all gas and no brakes. You are setting yourself up to eventually get hurt, okay? We cannot sprint at maximal velocities and speed and not be able to decelerate. You have got to be able to decelerate. If your posterior chain is weak, then you need to develop that in the weight room, okay? And through other drills that will help you build that, to build better deceleration so you can absorb the forces and then redirect the force in a change of direction. So a lot of times with newer athletes or even our high-level athletes that we've trained for a while, we'll work on deceleration in the first phase or the first block of training before we really start getting into heavy sprint loads. The tissue has to be able to absorb the forces that you're placing upon it. So when you're sprinting, they've done studies, and I'm going to misquote this here, but when you're sprinting, you're putting 3 to 4, maybe even 5 times the amount of forces that you weigh on your body. So just think about that. That's a lot of force on you. So your tissues and your systems have to be strong enough to absorb that force when you're decelerating. If not, like I said, eventually it might not happen right away, but eventually you're going to find yourself hurt. So again, we've got to train strength, we've got to train power, but we've also got to train speed. But they all should be cohesive and working together. You can't have speed without strength. You can't be powerful without strength. So just remember that when you're seeing these drills and these videos online. A lot of them are good. Some of them just might not be appropriate for where you're at right now, okay? And then some of them are just stupid. I'm just going to be completely honest, all right? I've been doing this for 20 years, over 20 years. I've seen it all. I've seen stuff come and go. Stuff gets more popular and it comes back in the algorithm, and then in a couple years it's back out. No one's doing it anymore. Stick with what's tried and true. You want to lift appropriately. If you really want to get fast, you want to lift appropriately, for where you're at. Obviously, a younger kid is going to focus on proper movement patterns and getting stronger in those movement patterns. An older athlete, older high school, college to pro, can lift a little bit heavier. Make sure that you mobilize. The joints are feeling good. The tissues are feeling good and pliable. And then make sure you jump and sprint and throw med balls. All right? It is that simple. The formula here is we warm up, then we're going to excite the central nervous system. We're either going to focus on speed training, power, so jumps, or med ball work. Then we're going to get into our strength work and our accessory work. It's really that simple. And I will argue that with anyone, until the day I die. So again, talking about team sport athletes, if we're talking about Olympic sprinters, it's a little bit more that goes into it than just, force production and mechanics, okay? But we're dealing predominantly with team sport athletes. So try those drills out, the next time that you're doing a speed workout. Try those out, see how they work for you, but try to time yourself, all right? You're not going to know if you're getting better and getting faster unless you're timing yourself. Probably one of the funniest things that I've seen over the last couple of years is we've had kids come to us that are getting prepared to go to these big high school combines and stuff for football or baseball. Baseball is really big in the 60-yard. Make sure that you're timing your sprints with a fully electrical timed system, okay? You're eliminating any human error, because we'll get kids that come in, let's just say football, that are going to these big high school combines, and they go, well, I was clocked and I ran a 4.5 or I ran a 4.4. We'll put them on our laser and they might run a 4.7 or a 4.8. And they'll go, oh, well, I ran a 4.4 or a 4.5. And when we ask, well, was it timed by a laser or was it handheld? 9 times out of 10, they say handheld. There's going to be human error there. You've got to run against a fully electrical time system. So all the sprints that we run in here and time in here are fully electrically timed, or they're timed off of the 1080 sprint or off the shred mill. Again, I know those are things that not everyone is going to have at their or not have available to them, but You can find some timing systems now that are relatively affordable. It doesn't have to be the top of the top. It just has to be something other than a stopwatch or your iPhone. All right, you're not going to get accurate timing off of the phone. Okay, trust me. So try those drills out. Try some of those tag games out and change of direction drills out the next time that you are training, and let us know how it goes for you. So if you have any questions about any of this stuff, feel free to DM us, email us. DMing is probably going to be the fastest way at the Rack APC for us to get back with you. We're more than happy to help. We're just trying to put as much information out there, free information out there as possible to help as many people as we can. Again, because there's a lot of good out there, but there's also a lot of bad out there, and we're trying to steer people towards the good. So hit us up if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that. We want to hear the feedback. We want to hear what you guys want to see, what you guys want us to talk about on these things. It's not just me rambling on these things. And we will get back to having guests on the next episode, because no one wants to see me sit here for 30 to 45 minutes and just talk. So we'll see you in the next one.
You are listening to the Rack Radio Podcast. Get ready